Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming. Like normal, I'm going to open the conference with a bit of a community update, which we call the weather report. Which, where we'll cover some of the latest things in the community, maybe some of the challenges we face, and then we'll work a little bit on, I'll explain a little bit how the format works today as well. So fundamentally, we have talks in the morning and designs in interactive sessions in the afternoon. Who has been at hackathons beforehand? Raise your hands. So about half of you, well, like 10 hackathons, about half of you. So I will explain towards the end how we deal with this, and the ones who are not virgins. I should have actually gotten virgin badges for the people who haven't been here before. Can help the other ones. But before we start, a big thank you to our sponsors. Without sponsorship, we couldn't normally put on events like this for the community. It costs quite a bit of money to do that. Now, we used to have a 2-day event. Now it's 3 days. But we also used to have like 2 events a year instead of 1, and so that not everybody needs to travel twice a year. We kind of combined the 2 into 1. So a big thank you and round of applause to our sponsors. So I wanted to reflect a little bit about actually what as a community we have done in the last year and a bit. And actually, trying to put this together, we've done quite a lot, and we've changed quite a lot in some areas. And in many areas, we've actually focused on working better together and becoming more efficient, which is, we're all here to have fun and write good code, but sometimes working together better is also quite important. So how did we do this? So there have been significant changes in our governance model. So we introduced this idea of what we call a leadership team for each project. So there's the hypervisor leadership team, which has all the committers on it, as well as the release managers. Can those guys who are on the who are committers stand up such that other people can see you? So those are the guys who check in your code and review it. So you may want to pester them. Sorry, guys, in the next 3 days, and build bridges. We're also making progress on a few things, such as we're becoming a CNA, which is a CVE numbering authority, right? Such that we can issue CVE numbers. So that's quite unusual for an open source project. It is quite a bit of an achievement. But when we get to do this finally, we have to formalize, some of the ways of how we work a little bit in terms of what do you get security support for in a hypervisor, and that means we have to deal with things like formalizing what the supported experimental and preview kind of tags mean, and all these kind of things. So there's a bit of work still to do, and we'll probably have a design session around this, I think, on Thursday. We've also added quite a bit of infrastructure and tooling. So we're just adding a second rack to our test lab. That's kind of almost 50% full in terms of servers. So Ian, I think, is going to give an overview in 2 different talks. Is it tomorrow, right? Tomorrow, yeah. To show you what we're doing, how we're operating it, and where we're spending our member companies' money on. We moved everything from HTTP to HTTPS for all websites. We also got a core infrastructure badge. That's like a security badge of honor from the Linux Foundation. We started to become a little bit more formal for when people issue security, raise security issues with the security team. We introduced RT to track all the issues, to make this all a little bit smoother. And also, Julian started introducing, our release manager. Julian, stand up. So Julian has been doing the 4.9 release, and I guess you're doing the next one as well? Yep. So he's been introducing a Jira to track features, and I guess we'll have to have a discussion later today somehow where we're going to take this next. We've also been delivering a lot of releases. So we had 2 hypervisor releases, the 4.8 and 4.9 release. So one of the big changes we worked on recently, and we've completed now, is to move to a bi-yearly release model. That seems to be working really well. We also had a Windows PV driver release, which Paul Durant, he heads up the Windows PV driver team within the project. Paul, just stand up. If somebody cares about PV drivers, that's your guy. He does graphic stuff as well. And we also have the Mirage OS unikernel and as a sub-project within Xen, and they had the 3.0 release as well earlier this year. And we had a new advisory board member, Qualcomm. Who's here from Qualcomm? Well, guys, say hello. We already started seeing contributions from those guys as well. So as I'm talking a little bit about the advisory board, I wanted to tell you a little bit where we're spending our money. So typically we spend about $300,000 to $500,000 US a year, depending on the year, and this roughly kind of splits into those categories. So we tend to spend about a quarter on marketing. We have a PR consultant that works for the project. Marketing is important for open source projects because it attracts new people. You have to tell the world what you're doing. That's, for example, also why we're recording all these sessions. We spend about 18% on events such as this. About 6% every year on internship programs such as Outreachy and so on. This year we were accepted into Google Summer of Code. So we didn't spend as much yet, but there's still a second round of Outreachy. 34%, almost 100,000, I think, this year on new hardware for the test track. And then the rest is to just run all the infrastructure, which isn't that cheap either. So again, we're becoming more professional, if you want so, as an open source community. So continuing on this team, what I've really seen in the last year or so is that we actually started to work together a lot better, and there's a lot more collaboration, and really at sort of different levels. We're seeing this at the leadership team level. They're all collaborating a lot more, solving problems up front a lot more than before. A big kudos also to the security team. They handle all our security vulnerabilities and are often putting a lot of time in this. When security vulnerabilities come in, that's pretty much an interrupt-driven activity. And I'll talk a little bit about that later because that sometimes has implications on code reviews. But we're also seeing a lot more behind-the-scene collaboration within the community. So, for example, big feature developments such as PVH v2, we have guys from Citrix, SUSE, and Oracle kind of splitting up the work amongst themselves. And we've seen something similar with live patching. We're seeing similar models in virtual machine introspection, and I hope we'll get more of this coming. Because we're working together, we've also argued a little bit less than I have seen in 2015 and 2016 in particular. Also, there's still quite a few bike shed issues we tend to get quite passionate about and spend a lot of cycles on. Don't really understand that, but hey, if you want to argue about bike sheds, fine with me. And we're doing a lot more planning and design work up front, and that's also helped a lot with avoiding friction within the community. So, there's been a lot of designs out recently around things like PV calls, various PV drivers, and ABIs, also designs around PVH-V2, and so on and so forth. And this event every afternoon will be a lot about these design sessions and planning and trying to work together to build understanding and resolve some of the big issues which are coming up in the next year. We also have an ARM community call now, which Stefano and Julian are running once a month. So if you're interested in this, find Stefano and Julian. Just guys, stand up quickly. And you should really join that. There's a lot of coordination going on there. And I hope we can put something similar together for x86 as well, but I'll need a volunteer who will be running that and setting the agenda for those calls, such that Andrew and Jan don't have to do all the paperworky stuff and can focus on real things. So with that in mind, a big thank you. Keep up the good work. Build bridges with all the other developers and people who are here, and really make good use of the next 3 days. So I wanted to look a little bit about contribution stats and some stats and sort of take some conclusions from it. So if you look at it, these are our contribution stats over the last 6 years or so. And the blue bar here, this is hypervisor only. The green bit is basically device drivers in Linux, in specific directories which are marked with Xen, and QEMU and the BSDs as well. And then the yellow bit is the Xen libvirt driver. And then I started overlaying. So you see, for a long time we've kind of been plateauing, and then we had this big jump in 2015, and now we seem to be plateauing again. And let me just look at what's happened there. So I overlaid the releases into this view. So there you see the specific releases. What's interesting about 2014 to 2015 is that in that year, we basically released in January 2015, and fundamentally what happened is a lot of changes which were worked on in 2014 were just deferred into 2015. So that kind of explains why there's that jump. So in reality, when I looked at that, a lot of those contributions should have probably been counted in a year earlier. And now we sort of seem to plateau again. And I don't quite know why that is. I have a hunch, and I'll kind of explain a little bit later. What's interesting also is if you look at the 4.8 and a 4.9 release, in 4.8, in 4.9 we had about 30% more contributions than in 4.8. But at the same time, if you look at it from a yearly basis, we actually seem to be at the same level as in the previous years. I don't quite know what to make of that, and there's a few possible explanations. So one is that that because of the new release model, we actually have less time in a year to do development, and we have more code freeze. Another one is to do with code reviews, which I'll come to a bit later. So the other thing which is usually interesting when you look at communities is who are the key players, who are the key contributors in the community. And we've really changed a lot in this area, right? So if you look at 2009, almost, most contributions then came from Citrix, right? So Xen was an open source project then, but it was very much dominated by Citrix. And what we've been seeing slowly is an increase of diversity. So we have, the Citrix contribution going down to just about half. We have a lot of contributions from Oracle, Intel, Red Hat's in there because fundamentally that's still doing a lot of, stuff around Linux and also the libvirt drivers. So these are the stats for Xen plus the drivers in BSD and Linux plus the libvirt driver. The Xen-specific libvirt driver. But then we also have new companies like Starlab turn up, which is interesting because many of them are building products or new products on top of Xen. Then start looking at it. Look at it last year, 2016. So you see Citrix contribution and all the big five. So the big five fundamentally contribute around 80% to the project. And then we have a lot of other companies which are starting to appear in those stats. Again, companies here which have Xen-based products, such as Bitdefender, Scientific, and so on. And what's happening, again, is we seem to see this stabilize. Same sort of level of diversity, pretty much similar distribution, but what is changing is that there's a lot of turnover to some degree in the smaller companies based on what the current priorities really are. So that's quite natural. If you have new companies building products, you might have them contribute what they need for the project to the community. Then they might work a little bit on a product, and then they'll come back in the next release cycle. So that's pretty much what we're seeing there. So to summarize, so it seems that we started to really grow in terms of in contribution volume in the last 3 years. It looks as if we might be stalling. There could be a problem there. And we're seeing a diversity increase with some volatility amongst newcomers, which is kind of what's expected. So let me talk about code reviews a little bit, because that is potentially an emerging problem area. And what I really wanted to do there is I'm going to show you a diagram which really highlights how much code reviews the top 5 people in a project are doing, and then the next 5, the next 10, the next 10, and then the rest. And what you really see here from 2011 to 2014, everybody's really ramping their efforts in terms of code review. That is very understandable, given that quality and security is really high on the agenda of everyone in the project. And again, here 2015 and 2016, we seem to have reached a point where the top 5 people, can't really do anymore. They're already doing a lot of reviews, about 8,000 comments a year spread over 5 people. So that's quite a lot of work. Andy, so how much time do you spend reviewing, for example? Just tell us. How many days a week? Oh, all right. You see, you're really burning those guys out. So we need How much? 50% of your time, yeah. So, and I expect that a lot of the others are doing the same, and that means, they can't, develop some of the good features they want to do, and they, maybe can't also address some of the big issues. So this is something where we also have a session around it a little bit later, how we can increase that base of reviewers within the community, because that's quite important in the long run. Because unless we fix this, we're not going to scale and grow going forward. So I kind of already talked this through. Yeah, so the only point I kind of wanted to make, so basically, unless we fix this, and we still have enough time to fix this now, we're going to have a scalability problem. Because basically, the number of code reviews, if our code review stays the same, capacity stays the same, the amount of contributions we can take in stays the same. It's really that simple. So if we want to grow and if we want to build more products on top of the platform, then we need more people to step up to do reviews. And remember the plateau in the contribution stats I showed? It's possible, but it's not quite conclusive that there's a link between that code review bottleneck and the number of contributions we're taking in per year. Unfortunately, we have no real easy way to measure how long our backlog is. But I know from Stefano, for example, and Julian, that at least in the ARM area, we seem to have some clear bottlenecks, and where, and some contributions are sitting there longer being reviewed than they have in the past. Is that right? Yeah. So there seems to be some evidence supporting this. So anyway, then I wanted to look at the top 10 reviewers per release. So you see there's a lot of, so a big round of applause to all of those guys on there. So, like if you look at this, we have Jan, Andy, Stefano, Julian. But what's really interesting is we actually had some changes in there. Like we had, can you actually see the colors there? So like, for example, in 4.7 and 4.6, Ian Campbell, who was one of our most prolific reviewers, he basically left the Xen community to work on something completely else, and then other people stepped up, right? And what that really means, it's possible for us as a community to get new people in and to get them up to speed and make them effective and have influence within the community. So we know we can do that. We just, have to make it happen. There's also an impact security vulnerabilities have on code reviews, and that is because a lot of the people who today are doing most of the code reviews, they're also on the security team. But I wanted to set the scene a little bit first. So if you look at the open source annual survey, so there's a big survey Black Duck does every year about open source, and one of the top 4 concerns, around what's the quality of a component. So 74% of all the respondents said that's the top concern. The second one is security issues in public-facing applications. Some concerns about IP, so we can ignore that. And then, another set of concerns around security issues. And the main concerns there is, and that's really important for us, if we ever had, a high-profile zero-day for Xen, which takes Amazon or some of the big cloud providers down, that would really, really be very bad for us. We get a lot of flack in the press anyway every single time we release a security vulnerability. Even so in most cases, so there's not been a single case where actually a big service, a big cloud provider was really affected. that would be really bad for us as a community. And that sort of generally is the case in open source. So if you look at stats and trends here, this shows you the number of vulnerabilities with CVE numbers which have been discovered in Xen, which is blue, in Linux, which is green, and in QEMU, but that's x86 KVM CVEs only. And you'll see that from 2015, really, the numbers here are going up. And what you see here is there's some projection, those little bars are projections for the end of the year for us. So what this means is there's more work for the security team. And a lot of this work is, quite often what we're now seeing, a lot of the security issues which are coming in, they're relatively complex, so they take longer to handle. So that's not that, and that means that the people who are on the security team, such as Andy, Jan, Ian, George, are suddenly, they won't be able to do code reviews because those things, have to be handled immediately. We get a report, we have to provide a fix, we then have to test it, get all the descriptions out, and if I remember correctly, just towards the end of the 4.9 release, we had 10 of those kind of issues come in a relatively short period of time, and that meant that key people within the community basically were almost flat out working on security issues for 3 or 4 weeks during the, was it right? 6 weeks during the end of a release cycle. And that, of course, impacts, again, that code review capacity. So if they suddenly go away and work on security issues, it doesn't mean that they hate you and ignore you. There could be another reason, right? And then also because there's media impact and so on, and we want to, smooth this whole process. We've been developing tooling and stuff like that to make this whole process easier for us. But again, we have to find the time to deal with this as well. So, where do we go from here? I think we can buy a little bit more time by doing a little bit of better planning and working better together. And this is what the next 3 days are all about. But in the long term, we really need more people stepping up and doing contributions for the project. And also, particularly if you work on Xen and you have a product or CPU set, a server or whatever, and it's important for you to get your stuff into the code base, it's actually in your own interest to step up. And you don't necessarily have to step up by by reviewing other people's code. We know that that's hard. You have to learn the code first. There's other ways of how you can help as well. For example, Ian Jackson and me right now, we spend quite a bit of time working with the test infrastructure and managing the project suppliers. That's an area where somebody could get started in relatively easily. George, who's one of the committers and also on a security team, he also maintains the Xen for CentOS packages. I think Ian kind of does some of the Debian packages as well. So, you can help by stepping up in some other areas and freeing up some of those guys' time as well. So any help there would be appreciated. And just to finalize, because if I look at the group of people we have here, we see the makeup of the community changing a little bit. We used to be just all about cloud and servers. There's a lot of security guys here, so anyone who does security, raise your hand. Yeah, that's quite or security products. It's about a quarter. We also have, new faces and new people who are doing embedded and automotive. If you work on that, raise your hand. That's about the same. Yeah. But you know what is still the case is that all the key people in the community today are in this cloud and server space. So again, there's an opportunity for you guys to step up and start shaping the direction of the project a bit more through bringing leadership and ideas to the table. And finally, I wanted to conclude because actually this is quite an impressive. Oh, that's interesting. That never happened to me before. Is that we actually have quite a lot of companies, behind these different market segments. And quite a lot of these are actually here. So, I'm already running over time, so a little bit about the Design Summit mechanics. We have a party on a boat tonight. There will be buses going from here. I think it says 7 or something in the schedule. Can somebody quickly check? 6. All right, so make sure you're here for the bus at 6. Or a little bit beforehand. If you can't make that and you have to be somewhere else, we can tell you where to go to catch the ship. And we'll get a great view of Budapest at night. Next year, we're aiming to have this event in China alongside LinuxCon. We don't know yet in which city LinuxCon is going to be. It's going to be either Shanghai or Shenzhen. And as soon as I know, I will work with the Linux Foundation on getting all the paperwork and all the stuff, all the plans in place. And hopefully we'll do that faster than last year. This year we were really late in organizing the summit, and I have to apologize for that. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the afternoon and how this works. So if you look at the schedule, you can use a filter there which says interactive design and problem solving sessions, and we have a few sessions there scheduled in the afternoon. And what you see here is, here we have a little board, and anyone who wanted to propose a new session, you can just take one of these stickers, put a title on there, and then you put your name on the back such that we know who's proposing this session. And then we have a scheduling session straight after lunch where we will try and move things around in the schedule to make sure that all those people who have to be in specific sessions can be. We'll try and do this as well as we can. So what I will try and do this from stage. It's going to be quite challenging with a crowd as big as we are. In the past, when we did the hackathon stuff, we were about half the amount of people. So I don't quite know how this will scale, but we'll try. And then if it doesn't work, then we'll try to do better the next day. So what I will probably be doing is I'll probably bring up the schedule and then get everybody to raise hands, and then we'll just try and move things around in real time. So we'll need a volunteer then who's basically going to move stickers around for me on that schedule to make that work. Who will volunteer for today? Okay, Julian. And then I'll just update the schedule immediately afterwards in real time. Also, what I wanted to do is give everyone who has a session to come up on a stage and give a very short pitch of what they want to talk about, such that people can make up their minds, particularly if it's a new session which hasn't been on a schedule for some time. And that's really it. I think we have a little bit of time for questions, if you have any. If not, do we have a break now, or do we have the next speaker coming up straight away? Okay. In that case, thank you very much. And if you have questions or concerns or whatever, just find me during the event.